The black SUVs didn't slow down as they stormed through the narrow, dusty road, engines roaring and tires kicking up thick clouds that swallowed the curious faces gathering outside. Children stopping mid-play, women freezing in place, and men shading their eyes to understand what kind of power had just entered their quiet world. Because nothing like this had ever happened here before. And when the convoy finally came to a halt in front of a small, worn-out house with cracked walls and a rusted roof that had clearly survived too many years of hardship, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The door of the first SUV opening slowly as a polished black shoe touched the ground, followed by a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit. Marcus Hale, a billionaire known for control, precision, and success. Yet in this moment, his face told a different story. His jaw tight, his eyes uncertain, his breathing slightly uneven as he stared at the house like it carried something heavier than all the deals he had ever closed. Because 9 years had passed since he last stood here. 9 years since he made a promise he never kept. And as his security team stood behind him, confused by the rare hesitation they were witnessing, Marcus took a slow step forward, then another, each one heavier than the last, as if the ground itself remembered his absence, until he finally reached the door, raised his hand, paused mid-air, as doubt tried to pull him back, but then forced himself forward and knocked. 3 slow, heavy knocks that echoed louder than expected, followed by silence, the kind that stretches seconds into something unbearable, until soft, careful footsteps approached, and the door creaked open to reveal a small boy, no older than 8, barefoot, thin, with observant eyes that studied Marcus as if trying to place him in a world where he clearly did not belong. And the boy asked quietly who he was, a simple question that struck Marcus harder than anything else, because for the first time in years, he did not have an answer. His voice catching as he tried to respond that he was looking for Mama Elena. Yet the boy did not move, did not step aside, only repeated the question again. "Who are you?" Just as a weak voice called from inside asking who it was, and the boy turned slightly and said someone was asking for her, followed by a brief pause before the voice replied, "Let him in." And as the boy stepped aside, Marcus walked into the house slowly. The moment he crossed the doorway, bringing a flood of memories crashing back all at once. The smell of the room, the silence, the weight of a past he had buried under wealth and ambition. Everything returning with painful clarity as he looked around at the worn furniture, the small space that felt even smaller now, until his eyes landed on her, Mama Elena, lying on a thin bed near the window, her body frail, her face aged, but her eyes still carrying that same warmth that had once filled the emptiness of his childhood. And the moment she saw him, those eyes lit up as she whispered that he came back, and something inside Marcus broke instantly as he moved closer with a trembling voice, calling her Mama and saying he was there, while she smiled gently and said she knew he would come, even though he knew he had taken far too long. The guilt rising in his chest as he apologized softly, but she shook her head and told him, "You do not apologize for coming home," even though the silence between them carried the weight of everything unsaid, as she looked at him and said he had changed, and he admitted not in the ways that mattered, prompting her to smile faintly and remind him how he used to sit in the corner of the room as a lonely boy waiting for parents who never showed up. And suddenly, he was back there again, a child sitting alone, waiting for love that never came until she did. the one person who made that empty house feel like something, feeding him, comforting him, listening to him, telling him he did not need rich parents to become great. Words he did not fully understand then, but held on to like a lifeline as he grew older and eventually left to chase success, or promising her he would come back, a promise he broke as years passed, and he built an empire, rising to unimaginable wealth while becoming emotionally emptier, always telling himself someday he would return until someday became now. And as he stood there, he noticed a stack of letters on the table, old and carefully arranged, his name written on them, his chest tightening as he opened one and saw words filled with warmth and hope, realizing they were from her, yet never sent. And when he asked why, she calmly explained she did not want to pull him back. She wanted him to become who he was meant to be, something that shattered him further as he discovered the money he had sent over the years, still untouched, asking why she never used it, only for her to say she was not waiting for his money. She was waiting for him. Words that hit him harder than any failure ever could, making all his success feel empty as he turned to the boy again and asked who he was, noticing the familiarity he could not ignore, until Mama Elena called the boy closer and revealed the truth that changed everything, that Daniel was his son. And in that moment, Marcus felt his entire world collapse, his mind rejecting it at first, as memories flooded back of a woman he once loved before leaving, someone who tried to reach him but never could, someone who died without him knowing she was carrying his child. And as the truth settled in, he staggered back, overwhelmed with disbelief and guilt, asking why she never told him, only for Mama Elena to say she did not want him to come back because he had to. She wanted him to come back because he wanted to. And that broke him completely as he realized he had missed everything. His son's first steps, his first words, his entire life. The weight of it crushing him as he broke down in tears, whispering that he missed everything, while Mama Elena calmly told him she raised the boy the way she raised him. And when he said he failed them both, she firmly corrected him, saying he only came late. And slowly, Marcus walked toward Daniel, kneeling in front of him with a trembling voice, asking if he knew who he was. The boy shaking his head as Marcus struggled to even say it, settling instead on saying he was someone who should have been there a long time ago. And from that moment, Marcus made a decision not to run anymore, not to hide behind money, but to stay, to be present, to rebuild something real. Oh, and as days passed, the silence between him and Daniel slowly turned into conversations, awkward at first, but gradually softer, more open, as the boy asked if he was really rich, and Marcus replied he was still learning what that meant. And when asked why he did not come before, Marcus admitted he thought he had time, a realization that carried more weight than any excuse, while he arranged better care for Mama Elena, but did not disappear behind resources, choosing instead to remain by her side, showing up every day, sitting with her, listening, sometimes in silence, sometimes in quiet conversations that filled the gaps left by years apart. And one afternoon, as the wind moved gently through the open window, Mama Elena looked at him and said softly, "Do you remember the day you left?" And Marcus nodded slowly, saying he remembered every word, to every step, every promise he failed to keep. And she smiled faintly and told him she never doubted he would find his way back, even if it took longer than expected. And Marcus shook his head, his voice heavy with regret, saying he wasted too much time chasing things that never truly mattered. And she responded gently that sometimes people have to get lost in order to understand what they were searching for, and that silence followed again. But this time, it was not heavy. It was peaceful, as if both of them finally understood something that did not need words. And over the next few days, Marcus found himself learning how to be present in ways he never had before. Sitting outside with Daniel, listening to his stories, answering his endless questions, teaching him small things, laughing in moments that felt unfamiliar but real. And slowly, Daniel began to open up more, asking deeper questions about life, about his mother, about why things happened the way they did. And Marcus answered honestly, not as a man trying to impress, but as a father trying to connect. And one evening, Daniel looked at him and asked quietly, "If you leave again, will you come back?" And Marcus paused, the question hitting him deeper than anything else. And he knelt down, looking directly into the boy's eyes, and said, "I'm not leaving this time." And Daniel studied him for a moment before nodding, not fully trusting yet, but willing to believe. And that was enough for Marcus, because trust was something he knew had to be earned, not demanded. And as the days turned into weeks, Marcus began making decisions that changed everything. Not just arranging care or sending money, but restructuring his life entirely, delegating his empire, stepping away from the constant chase, choosing instead to build something that could not be measured in numbers. And one evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm colors, Mama Elena called him closer again, her voice weaker now but still filled with calm. And she told him her time was near. And this time, Marcus did not deny it. He simply held her hand tighter, tears forming in his eyes as he thanked her for everything she had given him, everything she had sacrificed. And she looked at him with pride and said, "You became great." And Marcus shook his head, saying, "Not until now. Not until he understood what truly mattered." And she smiled softly, her eyes closing slowly as peace settled over her face. And Marcus remained there, holding her hand, long after the moment had passed, not out of denial, but out of gratitude, because this time he was present. This time he did not miss it. And in the days that followed, the house felt quieter but not empty, because something had shifted, something had been restored. And Marcus did not run back to his old life. Instead, he stayed, building a new rhythm, a new purpose, one that revolved around being there, showing up, listening, guiding, and learning. And Daniel began to change too, becoming more open, more confident, slowly filling the space that had once been defined by absence with something real. And one morning, as sunlight poured into the room, Daniel stood at the doorway, watching Marcus, hesitating for a moment before speaking. And then he said it, a single word that carried more meaning than anything Marcus had ever achieved. "Dad," and Marcus turned, frozen for a second, as the word settled into reality, and then he smiled. A genuine smile not shaped by success or control, but by connection. Responding softly as Daniel asked if they could go outside. And Marcus nodded, standing up and walking beside him. Not ahead, not behind, but with him. And as they stepped into the sunlight together, Marcus realized something he had never fully understood before. That everything he had built, everything he had chased, everything he thought defined him, none of it compared to this moment, this simple connection, this second chance. And as they walked forward side by side, the weight of the past no longer held him back, but instead shaped the man he had finally become. A man who came back thinking he was repaying a debt, but discovered that love was never something money could buy. And as the weeks turned into months, Marcus began to build a new life around Daniel, one that was not driven by deadlines or deals, but by presence and patience, waking up early to share simple breakfasts, walking him to school, learning the rhythm of his laughter, understanding his fears, and slowly becoming the father he never had. And there were moments of difficulty too, moments when Daniel would pull away, when old questions would resurface, when silence would return unexpectedly. But Marcus did not run this time. He stayed through every uncomfortable moment, every unanswered question, every fragile step forward, proving not with words but with consistency that he was there to stay. And one evening, Daniel brought out an old drawing, one he had kept hidden, showing a picture of a small house with 3 figures standing together. And when Marcus asked who they were, Daniel pointed and said, "That was Mama Elena. That was him. And that empty space was where you were supposed to be." And Marcus felt his chest tighten as he looked at the drawing, realizing how deeply his absence had been felt. And instead of turning away, he placed his hand gently on Daniel's shoulder and said, "I'm here now." And Daniel looked at him for a long moment before nodding, a quiet acceptance forming. And as time moved forward, Marcus found himself letting go of the version of success he once chased, redefining it not by wealth, but by connection, not by control, but by presence, not by power, but by love. And he began to use his resources differently, not to replace relationships, but to support them, improving the community quietly, ensuring other children would not grow up the way he did, building something meaningful without needing recognition. And through it all, Daniel remained at the center of his world, a constant reminder of what truly mattered. And one afternoon, as they sat outside watching the sun dip below the horizon, Daniel leaned against him and asked softly, "Are you happy now?" And Marcus paused, taking in the moment, the warmth, the peace he had searched for his entire life, and he smiled gently before answering. Because for the first time, he truly was, not because of what he owned, but because of who he had become. And as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Marcus realized that life had given him something rare, a second chance, not just to fix the past, but to build a future worth living. And as he looked at Daniel beside him, he knew that this was the greatest thing he would ever create. Not an empire, not a legacy written in money, but a bond, a presence, a love that would last beyond everything else. Proving in the end that he did not just return to repay a debt, but to rediscover himself. And that love, real love, was never something money could buy. And if this story touched you, if it made you think about someone you need to reconnect with, someone you have been putting off, then take that step before time makes the decision for you. Reach out, make the call, show up while you still can. And if you want more powerful stories like this that stay with you long after they end, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes the stories we hear are not just stories. They are reminders. Reminders that time is limited, that love is fragile, and that the greatest success in life is not what you build for the world to see, but what you build in the hearts of the people who matter most. And every day that Marcus spends with Daniel, every small laugh, every question answered, every story told, is proof that it is never too late to come back, to forgive yourself, to start over, and to discover that the richest life is the one filled with love, presence, and the simple acts that truly connect one heart to another. And as the night settled over the village, Marcus whispered quietly to Daniel, "Do you know why I came back?" And Daniel shook his head, and Marcus smiled softly, tears glistening in his eyes, because the answer had nothing to do with money or success. It was for this moment, this life. And for the first time in 9 long years, he felt whole. He felt complete. And he knew he would never leave again, because some debts are not repaid with money. Some promises are not fulfilled with words. And some love is meant to be lived, felt, and never abandoned. And that is the story of a man who returned, not just to a house, not just to a memory, but to the people who made him who he was, proving that the greatest fortune in the world is not measured in currency, but in hearts restored, bonds rebuilt, and love rediscovered. And as Marcus held Daniel's hand and gazed up at the stars, he silently promised himself, never again. Because this time, he had found the treasure he had been searching for his entire life. And it was waiting here all along,